Kevin Young continues to impress as BYU men's basketball coach. He adds 2 new assistant hires, both of which fit the bill of what he wants in his program and what he wants to build with BYU Hoops.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? I'm Jake Hatch, your host here on Locked On Cougars, resident BYU insider. Thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Appreciate all of you who like to call everydayers right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. This is your original daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars, and we are brought to you today by our friends over at Game Time. Download Game Time app today, create an account, use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Of course, some terms apply. Let's dive right in on today's show and get to the news, of the week. I missed yesterday's show, so I apologize for that. Had a little bit of a snafu with my schedule, and we are back at it, so thank you for bearing with me. But in the last 2 days, BYU makes 2 of the 3 assistant hires I have been talking about for some time on this podcast official. Will Voigt hired on be officially Monday as BYU associate head coach. He'll be the lead assistant, for lack of a better term, it appears, for Kevin Young. And then yesterday, Tim Fanning hired as a BYU assistant coach. So there's one spot to go, and I am fully expecting John Linehan to be the third and final assistant, or the fifth and final assistant, I should clarify, on Kevin Young's staff. And I think each one of these coaches offers something unique. Now, if you look at the history of these coaches, they have worked extensively in their coaching careers, both overseas, domestically, in a number of leagues. In the case of Will Voigt, he has got a professional experience, international experience on 3 different continents. You look at what Tim Fanning has. He's got links into the junior college, the high school ranks. He was an overtime elite assistant. He's developed guys like Denny Avdija, who's been playing for the Washington Wizards, was a former top 10 pick during his time at Maccabi Tel Aviv. He actually coached Elijah Bryant, the former BYU standout, who's been playing overseas for a number of years now when he was coaching at Tel Aviv. These two, speaking of Will Voigt and Tim Fanning, scream exactly what Kevin Young wants. They have professional experience. They got international ties to help BYU get into the international scene in terms of recruiting. And also, he also offers the opportunity for BYU to go after, both of them, excuse me, not he, both of them offer the opportunity for BYU to offer professional development type stuff. Now, the thing about Kevin Young is he has been a guy who's been very clear that he wants BYU to be a pathway for young men to go and accomplish their dreams of playing in the NBA. That's why guys like AJ DeBonsa were visiting BYU on an unofficial visit earlier this week. That's why Yegor Denim has officially signed with BYU, or he will be, he hasn't officially signed, excuse me, I should clarify that. He's not officially signed, but he will be in short time. He's committed to BYU. You have Mawat Mag coming to BYU as a grad transfer who's looking to transform himself and up his professional prospects. The simple goal, I think, of Kevin Young is he wants BYU to be successful in basketball, but at the same time, allow the young men on his roster to live their dreams professionally, whether that mean in the NBA, overseas, or otherwise. He wants to give them that pathway and give them the development that will give them the best opportunity to live that. Well, the other question it begs is, how is BYU doing all of this? Because let's be frank, when you bring a guy like Will Voigt onto BYU's staff, he's the former head coach of now the Austin Toros. They are the G League affiliate of the Phoenix Suns. How do you get a guy to step down from being the leader of his own team to being the head coach of his own team and accept an associate head coaching position in a college realm versus the professional realm when he's worked in the professional realm for quite some time? Simply put, money. Jeff Hansen was on the podcast on Monday and talked about the fact that the NIL sphere with the Royal Blue Collective, the donors, the high-level boosters involved with BYU athletics, they are all seemingly on the same page for the first time in quite some time, quite maybe literally the first time they've all been on the same page. And the investment into BYU athletics and BYU in basketball in this circumstance are unparalleled in BYU athletics history. And it's not a bad thing. I am celebrating it. I love the fact that they are finally opening the coffers, as it were, to make sure BYU is able to compete at a high level. The other thing is BYU themselves, the university or the athletic department more particularly, are also more flush with cash than they ever have been before. Remember, just last week, we had the Big 12 announce they are distributing $470 million to their member schools. Now, BYU is one of the new four newcomers into the conference, got a half share of what it was expected to be around $18 million. Folks, I'll just say I have very good authority that BYU's never seen an $18 million check at any point in their athletics history from any single revenue source, and more particularly TV rights. That's what the main part of that money comes from. So BYU's flush with cash in terms of an athletic department. They got boosters that are pumping more money in. NIL is obviously helping out because when Yegor Denim is allegedly making $1.5 million in NIL to come to BYU, well, that money's got to be coming from the Royal Blue Collective, and that means you got some pretty high-level boosters who are investing in that. The simple fact is BYU has pooled their resources to a higher level than they ever have been before. That has brought a question from a good friend of mine I was golfing with quite literally with yesterday, who said, Jake, what does this mean for BYU football? I'll just say this. BYU football, they're going to get plenty of investment in their own right. The other thing is right now is there's an excitement around BYU basketball. Could all that excitement go by the wayside if BYU were to fall flat on their face out of the chute this coming season in basketball? And a lot of people are like, whoa, I didn't sign up for this. Yeah, that could happen, but Kevin Young isn't going to let that happen. This is a guy who is highly driven to lead BYU to unparalleled heights as a basketball program, while at the same time getting more guys from BYU basketball into the professional and more particularly the NBA ranks than ever before. It can be a win-win-win all the way around for BYU basketball, BYU football, BYU athletics, fans, administrators, and everybody involved can win in this scenario. They've all got to work together. They all got to work in lockstep. They got to work in concert with one another. But should they pull that off, that is going to give them an opportunity to compete at the highest levels of college athletics. The era of college athletics of yesteryear, where it was an altruistic, amateur model, those have been gone for decades at this point, folks. Get with the times now. It is going to be pay for play. It is going to be a true minor league for the professional leagues at some point, if it's not already that. It's been that way for years. Just so happens now the athletes are starting to get a little bit of the miniature slice of that pie. Up to $22 million to be shared annually with the athletes. Good on them. I would hope that the vast majority of that gets directed to BYU football and BYU basketball as the chief revenue operators when it comes to BYU athletics and just in an overall athletics department. But Title IX obviously will have its say, and we'll see what the ultimate ruling is on that if you have to split it 50-50 down between men's and women's sports. But regardless, there is more money being pumped into BYU athletics than ever before. And if it's utilized the right way and obviously it's channeled the right way, it can lead BYU to heights literally never before seen. I have got hopes at some point in my life to see BYU make a Final Four run in basketball. Alas, that feels like it could be a ways off, but with Kevin Young, is it really that far off? It's a great question. All right, we will talk a little bit more about Kevin Young on the recruiting trail. Just a long line of a lot of high-level players that are going to visit BYU. This latest one could be a guy that could impact BYU as soon as this season because he recently parted ways with his former program in the desert down there in Tucson. We'll talk about who Jamari Smalls is and what he could offer to BYU basketball. We'll do that next as we roll on right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Now, Game Time is here for you guys no matter what you're into. If you want to get to the NBA Finals and watch the Mavericks or the Celtics get after it and win an NBA title, hopefully, you can do that with the friends at Game Time. Prices on the Game Time actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off. So you find yourself in Beantown, you find yourself in Dallas, you can get out to those games and do it for as cheap as possible. The best part is they have killer last-minute deals, all in prices. Views from your seat and the lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying your NBA Finals tickets, and they do it with a very, very simple and easy to use website and app. The best part about it is they've got all those guarantees. Once again, Game Time ticket coverage. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. They also will credit you 110% of the difference if you find a lower ticket on the same row that you bought tickets via Game Time. Think about it, my friends. There's no downside to this. So download the Game Time app today, create an account, use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create that account and redeem the promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off your first purchase. Once again, download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Appreciate all of you for being with us. Want to remind you guys, if you've not done so already, please make sure you check out Locked On Sports Today. It is your daily source for all the biggest news you need to hear about, but you don't have to deal with all the other talking heads on the other networks that seem to be screaming, forcing you to push mute on your TV or turn it all the way down to feel like you can get anything out of it. Locked On Sports Today is available wherever you get your podcasts on YouTube. You also can check it out on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. I would encourage you guys to give it a shot today. All right, let's talk a little bit about another recruiting visit BYU will have for BYU basketball. Now, AJ DeBonsa made an unofficial visit earlier this week, and that's obviously a big deal for BYU basketball because he's the number one recruit in the 2025 recruiting class. He's going to be playing his high school ball literally down the street. I was like, literally, but it's 3 hours down the street in Hurricane, Utah, this upcoming year with Utah Prep basketball. And he said, telling Mitch Harper from KSL Sports, I came out on an unofficial visit, excuse me. I hope they will have me back out on an official visit, or they will get an official visit from me. Now, that could sound ominous. That could sound like him patronizing BYU, TBD. But the fact that he even took the time to check out BYU basketball, I think says something. This is a young man. He made it very clear. He plans on being a one and done. He plans on being a guy who's playing in the NBA in 2 years' time. And I can understand that. He has been trained from the time he was very, very young. And he's been a prodigious talent for literally a decade or more, it feels like at this point. And he wants to go and live his dream in the NBA. Can BYU give him that pathway and give him the best development along the way to that? He also says he wants to win a national championship. Well, a guy of his caliber could help BYU get to that level. I've said I want to see BYU make a Final Four. Well, AJ DeBonsa, Yegor Denim, and the guy we're going to talk about here momentarily, Jamari Phillips, could absolutely be the guys that could help BYU get over the top and live that dream. We'll see what happens. But just heads up on this 2024 four-star prospect, Jamari Phillips plans to take visits to Oregon, Georgia Tech, and BYU within the next 2 weeks. This is a report coming out yesterday. He's scheduled to visit Oregon beginning this coming Wednesday, and then working on locking in dates with BYU and Georgia Tech upcoming. This would be another big addition for BYU. Phillips was locked in with Arizona, and then about a week ago, I'm not privy to all the information. I was just looking at it, kind of glancing at different things as I was preparing for today's show. He parted ways. And for whatever reason, him in Arizona, it was not going to work out, so they parted ways. And I know he's looking for a new opportunity, and BYU may be the beneficiary of this. He is a top-rated talent. You look at his 24/7 sports rating. He's a four-star talent, a 93 on 24/7 sports. The composite rating, though, out of this world, 98. This is a guy who's a top-tier prospect, 6'3", 190-pound shooting guard type that I think would be another prodigious wing player for BYU. Could come to BYU and develop his game. I'm sure that at the level he's been playing at, he has aspirations of potentially being a one and done. But at the same time, he's got all kinds of talent. He's an Arizona prep star. He's been playing at, what was the high school? I had to look it up one more time. Dream City Christian down in Glendale, Arizona. Playing his hoops down there, but he's number 52 nationally. He's the 10th rated shooting guard in the country, according to 24/7 Sports. Why can't BYU continue to do this? Like, the thing about this is Kevin Young continues to prove that he can get guys to have interest in BYU. And I see some of the comments every so often. Well, it's good that he can get him on visits, Jake, but why can't he ultimately win the recruiting battle and get him to sign with BYU? Point to Yegor Denim. That is a guy, Yegor Denim, if you look at the ratings for 24/7 Sports, he doesn't have one, but he would be a top tier, like we're talking top 10 in the country type guy. He's going to be a top 10 pick in next year's NBA draft in most people's eyes. So he has proven that he can win recruiting battles. Can he get a guy like Jamari Phillips to come to BYU? That would be another huge win for BYU. The thing about it is they've got 2 scholarships remaining, and ultimately they could maybe make room for a third. If they were to move one of the current guys, I would look at maybe a guy like Trey Stewart and say, hey, we want you to be a walk-on with the program because we need to open up a scholarship or two, but that is a conversation for down the road. You got 2 open scholarships to work with right now, and could Jamari Phillips be the latest to add to BYU's roster? There's a lot of thought out there, and I agree with it. The BYU's overall rotation may very well be set already with the number of players they already have on the roster and the high level those players can play at. That might be the case. But is a guy like Jamari Phillips going to come into BYU expecting to sit on the bench? Absolutely not. There's going to be some tough decisions made by Kevin Young this year. There's absolutely no doubt about that. He's going to have to tell some guys, hey, you're not going to get the minutes you're thinking you're going to get in this program, because there just simply are only so many minutes, so many shots, and so many just overall opportunities and looks that can go around on a basketball team. There are going to be very clear delineations of this is a star player, that is you're a role player. That they're going to be told how they fit in BYU's rotation. But at the same time, the competition, let's say a guy like Jamari Phillips comes in, he's probably a little bit behind the 8 ball, looking at other guys on the roster. Well, he's going to have to go into training camp over the 6 weeks, beginning in September when BYU begins training camp, leading up to their November 5th opener. And he's going to have to prove himself to be the best, if not if not the best player on BYU's roster at shooting guard. He's going to have to beat out Yegor Denham. He's going to have to beat out Trevin Nell. He's going to have to beat out Richie Saunders. There are going to be guys who are going to be gunning for the same minutes, the same opportunities that he's looking for. But that is what makes BYU better in the long run, is to have these guys competing tooth and nail, dog-eat-dog world out there, and prove themselves at the highest level. I would love to see it happen. I would love to see these guys getting after it and showing what they're capable of literally every day in practice. I guess a little bit of a heads up that they're expected to have media availability tomorrow with Kevin Young, as well as BYU players. I would imagine those are Dallin Hall, Richie Saunders types, because I don't think you're going to have Yegor Denham signed in time. He's also not going to be on campus. But the nice part is they're having some media availability, and we'll get some better feel for how Kevin Young is settling in Provo, and look forward to that. So stay tuned for tomorrow's podcast. We'll dig into that. But the other thing is I look at what BYU is trying to build with this basketball program, and they want it to be an NBA factory. So you want to have top-tier players. You want to have as many good players on that roster as possible. And if they are forced to sit the bench, they're forced to sit the bench, and they very well may take the opportunity to leave at the first opportunity via the transfer portal after that. But the thing is, those players, even if they're towards the end of the rotation, if they're as good players as you think they are, they're going to make everybody in front of them better, or they will pass all of them up and rise to the top and get the playing time, the minutes that they're looking for. So I look at what Jamari Phillips offers to BYU, and I look at it and say, yeah, he absolutely would have a role for BYU, but he's also going to be very hard-pressed probably to find minutes and beat out veteran players who have come back to BYU with the whole intention of being starting caliber players. I'm looking at you, Richie Saunders. I'm looking at Yegor Denham, who's expected to be a one and done. He's not coming to BYU thinking, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to play a part-time role for this basketball program. They are dead serious about expecting to be the guys for BYU. And if Jamari Phillips were to pick BYU, he's going to have to come in and prove that he is as good, like I said, or better than those guys to pass them up. That's only going to make every party involved in those potential recruiting battles better. That's going to make BYU as a team better. And that's exactly what Kevin Young, I think, envisions for the BYU basketball program. He wants the toughest, hard-nosed team he can find, also graced by the best talent he can find, and then let the chips fall where they may, see what they're able to accomplish. But it's incredible to watch the transformation. Mark Pope was recruiting at a fairly high level for BYU while he was the head coach in Provo. Kevin Young has taken that baton, and he's like run like a 9-second 100-meter dash, and he's absolutely obliterating it. And it's just incredible to see the type of response from recruits that he is getting. You should be excited about this, folks. That's the thing about this, is this should be a very exciting thing for you as a Cougar fan. So that makes you think, hey, what could BYU ultimately accomplish with Kevin Young as their head coach? He's got a 7-year contract, everybody. He's not planning on taking the first train out of Provo. I don't think he signs a 7-year deal if he had that in mind. And it sounds like everything we've heard from him, and take it at face value if you want, but everything he has said is he wants to build something sustainable and long-term in Provo. If that is the case, he's off to a swimming start. And obviously, proof will come in terms of the wins and losses on the court. But in terms of the winning the press conference, he is knocking that out of the park. It's a grand slam every single time. It feels like he steps up to the plate. So mixing and matching metaphors, but it's a really, really fun time to be a BYU basketball fan. And we'll see if Jamari Phillips is the latest addition to the Cougars and if he's going to add to that roster. But it's a fun fun thing to see what BYU is building here. John Rothstein's got BYU in the mid-30s in his top 45 teams in the country. It's a great spot to be for the Cougars. I think the bracketology, most recent bracketology from Joe Lunardi has them as a 9 seed. There's work to be done, obviously, because BYU was a 6 seed a year ago, and who's to say they can't improve on that? But the Big 12's gotten better, and BYU is getting better as well. And it's going to be a really, really interesting season ahead to see what Kevin Young can accomplish in his debut season as BYU basketball head coach. But once again, in the roughly 2 months since he's been hired as BYU men's basketball coach, he has been awesome. Just awesome at what he has been doing on the recruiting trail. We talked about the assistants earlier in Will Voigt and Tim Fanning, and expected to have John Linehan on board along with Brandon Dunson and Chris Burgess. He is absolutely killing it out there, and we'll see what he has for an encore, as it were, coming up probably pretty soon. It just feels like the news continues to roll in literally day by day, but it's really, really fun to be tracking it all. And we'll have plenty of coverage for you guys every single day right here on the podcast as well. All right, coming up here in just a moment, we're going to flip over to BYU football and talk a little recruiting there. The Cougars had an opportunity to visit with a high-level prospect from Virginia. We talked about him last week on the podcast ahead of his visit. How did things go for Micah Matthews and his visit to BYU? We'll dig into that next as we roll on right here on Locked On Cougars. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Hope you guys will consider signing up for our Locked On Cougars Insider group. It's a great way to get inside intel from me as I'm hearing it literally live. I'm sending it to you in the form of a text message. It's the best way to get information, it feels like, because you see it instantaneously on your phone. You can fire back with a text message of your own. I'm seeing it on my end. The best part is we can have back and forth conversations. If you guys want to sign up for that, click this link in the show notes below, or just go and join us on social media. We post it all the time as well over there. So join us, 14-day free trial to see if it's the right option for you, and then just $4.99 a month afterwards, $5 a month to join us and be a part of our Locked On Cougars Insider group. I hope you guys will consider joining us there. All right, a couple of notes before we go on today's show is congratulations to 2 former BYU baseball players in Justin Sterner as well as Daniel Schneeman on making their MLB debuts, and both of them doing it in style. Really cool to see. Justin Sterner gave 2 scoreless innings for the Tampa Bay Rays in his debut, and then Schneeman 2 RBI for the Cleveland Guardians. Sterner pitching for the Tampa Bay Rays. It's cool to see former BYU baseball players in the show. It's awesome to see them live their dream. There's a lot of guys who go through the minor league ranks and top out at a certain level, sometimes AA, sometimes AAA. But good to see guys finally get their opportunity to break into the majors and get into, as they call it, the show, because there are very few people quite literally in the world that can say that they have been an MLB player. You can add Justin Sterner and Daniel Schneeman to that list, and that's a pretty exclusive club. So congratulations to them on accomplishing those dreams. Now, BYU football continues to try and fill out their roster as well, looking ahead to the future as well. They had an official visit earlier, I guess, last week, midweek, from Micah Matthews, a 4-star prospect out of Virginia, plays both baseball and football, and could be an MLB draft pick. That is actually a big conversation piece around what he's going to do with his future. He could get drafted high enough and get a big enough signing bonus from an MLB team via that amateur draft that he could say, you know what? Passing on my dream of playing college sports, I'm going to go be a professional and play in the majors. And obviously start on the minor leagues and build your way through that. But Micah Matthews had a very strong impression made on him by BYU, because just reading the story about this, I got lots of family in Utah. Said Matthews, his mother, as a background for you guys, is of Samoan descent. So he has got Polynesian ancestry in his veins, and that's the reason why he's got a lot of family out here. He says, I was able to spend some time with them while I was out there, so being far from Virginia won't be a problem, because obviously you'd think coming clear across the country might be a little bit of an issue, but when your mom has got that lineage, obviously that helps out. That he said that BYU is a great tradition, they have a great fan base. Provo has probably the best view in college football with the snow-capped mountains surrounding the stadium. He's not wrong about that. And it sounds like he had conversations with Kalani Sitake, Aaron Roderick, and as well as Fesi Sitake during his visit. All 3 individuals you'd expect to be there for an official visit of this caliber. And he said this about the coaching staff: the coaching staff is very good. I've met with all the offensive staff, and they have a vision of using how they used Puka Nacua. Now, that's a great way to sell things. Look what Puka's doing. Look what he's doing in the NFL, and envision yourself doing that exact same thing. Now, the other thing is that following a visit to BYU, Micah Matthews made the trek to visit Utah. Obviously, the Utes are going to be trying to make their own impression. But as I understand it, BYU, as part of their pitch, you can see it in the pictures he posted from his official visit. BYU baseball is also in the mix here. BYU has a track record of allowing players to go and play baseball, even though they're on the football team. Look no further than Jaron Hall. Jaron Hall was a very capable outfielder. And there are people that told me had Jaron pursued baseball full time, he very easily would have been an MLB draft pick in his own right had he decided to stick with that sport. Alas, he decided to go with football and ended up being a draft pick by the Minnesota Vikings. So he's lived his dream in two sports. Well, BYU's done that with a number of guys. The Hanneman brothers, Micah and Jacob. Matt Bushman for a time was a BYU baseball player in addition to their time playing BYU football. Why couldn't Micah Matthews be part of that? And I'm glad BYU has acknowledged that and obviously has been pitching him on the opportunity to play both sports. It's obviously not easy for athletes to make that transition, and it can interrupt with spring ball and the like when it comes to balancing your baseball schedule with football. But here's the deal. BYU has got experience with it. You saw him in the picture in those pinstripes the BYU baseball program wears. I'm glad to hear that BYU is making that pitch for him to consider playing both sports. And I think it's one that BYU can use that's unique because of the track record. Aaron Roderick, as his offensive coordinator, can say, hey, my starting quarterback was playing baseball. Very few programs are going to allow you to do that. John Rice Plumlee down there at UCF got that opportunity, but very few other programs out there in the world are going to let you do that. And we would let you have that opportunity to live both dreams, playing both baseball and football. It's a great pitch for BYU to use, and I'm hopeful it will pay off in the case of Micah Matthews picking the Cougars, but he's still got official visits upcoming to Virginia Tech, North Carolina, and Maryland, so he's going to go back and visit programs closer to home, obviously on the East Coast, but I think BYU made a solid, positive impression on Micah Matthews, and I can really acknowledge the fact that using the baseball element might be one that other programs are reticent to do because a lot of coaches, let's be real, a lot of coaches are not willing to give their players an opportunity to go out and live their dreams playing other sports. BYU's proven it. They've already done it. And the nice part is it appears that was a part of their recruiting angle on that official visit as Micah Matthews came to Provo. All right, that's going to do it for today's edition of the show. Thank you once again for bearing with me on us missing our Tuesday edition of the show. We'll be back at it, though, every single day throughout the summer, getting you guys ready for BYU football upcoming. It's coming quick, folks. Big 12 Media Days not that far off. It's about a month away from now, give or take. And we're looking forward to that. And obviously a big opportunity as BYU tries to make a better impression in year 2 in the Big 12. And we'll have you covered in the lead up to that every single day right here on Locked On Cougars. I want to remind you guys real quick, thank you once again for making it your first listen of the day, and thank you to all of you who like to call everydayers. Make sure you're an everydayer. Check us out every single day because the best part is you will always be the smartest BYU fan in the room. I can promise you when it comes to this podcast, people tell me all the time they are impressing people around them with their knowledge and say, hey, Jake, you're the backbone of that. And that's my goal here. I want to make you guys the most knowledgeable, smartest BYU fans in the room. So that way everybody's looking at you like, how does he know all about that? Or how does she know all about that? Well, we're your ace up the sleeve. We're right here for you guys. And a big thank you to all of you for your support, as always, once again, of the Locked On Cougars podcast.